In the cold, endless depths of space, a human ship drifted slowly, its engines humming faintly as if they too had given up. The stars around them shone brightly, yet the silence in the cockpit felt overwhelming. The ship, the Resolute, had been through hell. It had survived battles, harsh space storms, and even sabotage from enemy factions. But now, it was alone. Cast out, rejected, Captain Hargrave stood at the front of the ship's control room, staring at the viewscreen. His face was weathered, marked by years of struggle, but his eyes were sharp, filled with uncertainty. He had spent years leading his crew, keeping them alive against the odds. But today, the galaxy had thrown a blow they couldn't escape. The galaxy had cast them out. The Galactic Council, the great assembly of powerful alien races, had made their decision. The humans were no longer welcome in the great alliance of the stars. Once, the Council had feared humanity's potential. They saw the humans as a rising power that could challenge their centuries-old dominance. But now, humanity was a forgotten species, a group that had overstayed its welcome. Their technology was no match for the advanced alien races, and their ideas, their dreams of peace and unity, were considered foolish and weak. "This is it," Captain Hargrave muttered under his breath. He turned to the crew who were gathered around him. They, too, looked lost, unsure of their next move. The rejection from the Galactic Council was not just a blow to their survival, it was a blow to their very identity. "Captain, what do we do now?" asked Lieutenant Harper, a young officer who had always followed Hargrave's lead with trust and determination. Her voice trembled, but she kept her posture straight, as if trying to hold on to some sliver of hope. Hargrave looked at her, his face hardening. He had always believed that humanity would one day join the stars in peace, standing side by side with the other races. But the Council had seen them as a threat, and now, they were left with nothing, not a single ally in the entire galaxy. "We survive," he said quietly. "That's all we can do. We find a way to survive." But as the words left his mouth, even Hargrave wasn't sure what they meant. Without the protection of the Council, without any real allies, survival seemed impossible. The humans were a small species, surrounded by enemies on every side. The galaxy was a vast place, full of powerful forces, and humanity was nothing but a speck in the dark. The crew fell silent, each of them lost in their thoughts. They had always known that humanity was on the edge of extinction. They had always known that the galaxy didn't want them, but this was different. This was the final word from the galaxy itself. They were alone, rejected, forgotten. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Green, a quiet but intelligent officer who had been monitoring the ship's long-range sensors. His voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, you need to see this," Green said urgently. Hargrave walked over to Green's station, his boots echoing on the metal floor. Green pointed at the screen. There, in the distance, a strange signal had appeared on the ship's sensors. It wasn't a ship or a known structure, it was an anomaly. A faint pulsing signal that seemed out of place. Something had sent it. Something that shouldn't be there. Hargrave's heart skipped a beat. In the current state of the galaxy, a signal like that could mean anything: an enemy trapped, a dying star sending out a final pulse, or something far more mysterious. But there was only one way to find out. "Is it a trap?" Hargrave asked, his voice low but full of suspicion. Green shook his head. "It doesn't match anything we've seen before, Captain. It's strange, but it's there, and it's not going away." The captain stared at the screen. What could this signal mean? Why had it appeared now, just when they were at their most vulnerable? Hargrave felt a knot tighten in his chest. But in a galaxy that had rejected them, could they afford to ignore even the smallest possibility of hope? "We're going," he said. "Prepare the crew, full speed ahead." As the crew scrambled to follow orders, Hargrave's mind raced. What were they walking into? Was this signal some sort of last-ditch hope, or was it just another cruel trick the galaxy had played on them? There were no guarantees, no certainty. They were already cast out, with no place left to turn. But perhaps, just perhaps, this strange signal was a sign, one last chance. Hargrave wasn't ready to give up on humanity just yet. He would follow this signal to the end, even if it led them straight into the heart of danger. The human spirit had always been one of resilience, of survival. If this signal meant something, anything, he would pursue it. The Resolute's engines roared to life, and the ship turned toward the unknown, following the mysterious signal into the darkness of space. With the hum of the engines filling the air and the stars fading behind them, Captain Hargrave couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Rejected, forgotten by the galaxy, but still moving forward into the unknown. Suspense. What lay ahead for the humans? Could this strange signal lead them to salvation, Or would it be the final step into the galaxy's cold indifference? They had no choice but to find out. The Resolute drifted through the endless void of space, its hull groaning as it cut through the cold silence. Captain Hargrave stood at the helm, his hands steady on the controls, but his mind was far from calm. The signal they had picked up was unlike anything he had ever encountered. There was no explanation for it, no reason for it to exist in a galaxy that had already cast them aside. His fingers tightened on the console as the ship pushed deeper into uncharted space. "Captain," Lieutenant Green's voice crackled from behind him. "We're getting closer. The signal's getting stronger." Hargrave didn't answer immediately. He wasn't sure if he was relieved or uneasy. The unknown could be both a savior and a predator, and in the current state of humanity, they didn't have the luxury of being picky. What was this strange message in the dark? Who or what was sending it, and why? "Prepare for anything," Hargrave finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "We're not sure what we're walking into." The crew moved with a practiced efficiency, checking systems and securing everything for what might be the most important and dangerous thing they had ever done. They were no longer welcome in the galaxy. The ships that once surrounded them had turned their backs. Every single alien race in the Council had abandoned them. And yet, here they were, chasing an enigma in the cold. Black night. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the silence of space pressing down on them like a heavy weight. The faint signal was now loud enough to be heard on every console in the ship. It pulsed steadily like a heartbeat. But it wasn't a ship. No, this wasn't any ordinary transmission. The signal wasn't mechanical, it was almost organic. "This is not just a signal," Green said, his voice tight with a mix of excitement and fear. "It's almost like it's alive." Hargrave's mind raced. "Alive? What do you mean?" Green hesitated, his brow furrowing. "It's like it's trying to communicate, but in a way we don't understand. It's almost as if it's reaching out to us, guiding us somewhere." Captain Hargrave felt his chest tighten. Could this be some ancient remnant of a long-lost civilization, calling out in the same way humans once reached for the stars? Could this be their salvation? Or was it a trap? They pressed forward. The signal was leading them now, not toward any familiar star system, but toward a region of space known as the Abyssa, part of the galaxy that few dared venture into. It was a place where even the bravest had disappeared without a trace, swallowed by the blackness that seemed to consume all light. Hargrave had heard the stories alien ships, once mighty, that had disappeared into that cold expanse, never to return. As the ship entered the edge of the abyss, the temperature in the control room seemed to drop, and a strange hum filled the air, vibrating in Hargrave's chest. The signal grew louder, its pulse more insistent. Whatever it was close. "Captain, we're approaching an object," said Lieutenant Harper, her voice full of disbelief. She pointed to a distant speck on the screen. It was barely visible at first, but as they drew closer, the object began to take shape. What they saw shocked them all. A massive station, ancient, derelict, yet perfectly intact. It hung in the void like some forgotten relic of a time long past. Its structure was unlike anything the humans had ever seen, a twisted combination of sleek, sharp angles and organic curves. It was as if it was alive, yet in a way that defied understanding. The entire station shimmered faintly, an eerie glow pulsing in its core like a heartbeat. Green's voice trembled as he spoke. "What is that?" "I don't know," Hargrave replied, his mind racing. "But we're going in." The ship slowly moved toward the station, docking clamps extending as they prepared to make contact. There was a deep, unsettling feeling in Hargrave's gut. This place wasn't like anything the galaxy had ever seen. It had no markings of any known civilization, no flags, no symbols of power. Just a vast, cold monument to something that was long gone. The crew suited up, the air around them thick with tension. They couldn't afford to be reckless. No one knew what they were about to find. "Keep your weapons ready," Hargrave ordered, his voice firm. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." With heavy footsteps echoing through the empty corridors of the ship, the team moved toward the airlock. The moment the airlock hissed open, a cold breeze swept through them, sending a chill down their spines. The station's interior was dark, save for the faint glow that came from deep within its walls. Strange symbols were etched into the metal around them, but they were unlike any written language the crew had ever seen. They were twisted, almost flowing in their design, as if the station itself had grown from the very fabric of space. "Stay close," Hargrave whispered. Signaling to the others, they moved forward, the light from their helmets casting long shadows across the strange alien architecture. The further they went, the more they felt as though they were being watched. The air felt alive, as if something in the walls was stirring, waiting. They passed halls that stretched on endlessly, rooms that seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, and then they found it a room that stood apart from all the others. At its center stood a console, its surface covered in alien symbols, its glow brighter than anything they had seen in the station. As they approached, a soft, melodic hum filled the room, and the console flickered to life. A voice, deep and resonant, spoke in a language that was both familiar and foreign. "We have been waiting," the voice intoned, sending a shiver through the crew. Hargrave's heart skipped a beat. This was no ordinary message. Whoever or whatever had built this station had been waiting for them. Suddenly, the console flickered again, and an image appeared on the screen. A figure tall, humanoid, yet not human loomed over them. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, its presence both comforting and terrifying at the same time. "We are the Keepers," the figure said, its voice filled with ancient authority. "You are not the first, you will not be the last." And with those words, the crew realized that this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of something far larger than they had ever imagined. They had been rejected by the galaxy, yes, but perhaps, in this ancient place, they had found something more important, something that could change their future forever. But what would the cost be? And who or what were the Keepers? The answers were just beginning to unfold. The crew stood frozen, the air thick with uncertainty. The figure on the screen, a being of light and shadow, stared at them with eyes that seemed to pierce through time itself. Hargrave's breath caught in his throat as the words of the Keepers echoed in his mind. "You are not the first. You will not be the last." There was something about the way it said those words, something foreboding, yet oddly welcoming, as if they were part of a long and forgotten history, something greater than themselves. "Captain," Harper's voice broke through his thoughts. She was staring at the screen, eyes wide with disbelief. The rest of the crew was equally silent, each of them trying to comprehend what they were seeing. Hargrave took a deep breath, his mind racing. The Keepers, who were they? What did they mean by those words? And why were they showing this image to humanity now, after all the galaxy had done to cast them aside? The being on the screen spoke again, its voice like a deep hum, vibrating through the very walls of the station. "You stand at the threshold," the figure said, its words slow and deliberate, as if it was weighing each one carefully. "The galaxy will never accept you. You were cast aside for reasons far beyond your understanding. But there is more. There is a way for you to rise." The crew was still, no one daring to move. The words of the Keeper filled the air like an ancient prophecy. Hargrave felt a wave of unease wash over him, but something else stirred within him, an unfamiliar sense of hope. Could this be what they had been searching for all this time? Was this the key to their survival, to taking their place in the stars? The Keeper's image flickered, its glowing eyes narrowing as it continued. "We offer you a path," it said, "but it will require sacrifice. The galaxy does not tolerate those who defy it. You will need to rise beyond what you are. You must become more than human, more than what you ever imagined. Only then will you have the power to challenge the forces that have abandoned you." Hargrave's heart raced. He had never believed in easy solutions, especially in a galaxy that had shown nothing but disdain for his people. But this was different. What could this being mean by rising beyond humanity? Was it offering them power, something far greater than the technology they had once dreamed of? The crew shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other as the weight of the Keeper's words pressed down on them. The air in the room felt colder now, the tension thickening with every passing second. Hargrave took a step forward, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. "What kind of power are we talking about? What would you ask of us?" The Keeper's figure shimmered, its features shifting like liquid light. It didn't answer right away, instead focusing its gaze on Hargrave as though it were reading his very soul. The silence was deafening. "Power beyond the limits of your kind," the Keeper finally replied, its voice lower now, carrying a deeper, more urgent tone. "The power to bend the very fabric of space and time, the ability to control energy, to reshape the world around you. But such power comes at a cost. It is not given freely. It must be earned." Hargrave's mind raced. Bend space and time, control energy. What kind of force could offer such abilities? Could it be real? He glanced at his crew, their faces a mix of awe and fear. There was no going back now. The galaxy had already rejected them. Could they afford to ignore this opportunity, whatever it might be? "Why us?" Harper asked, her voice trembling slightly but filled with curiosity. "Why offer this to humanity?" The Keeper's image flickered again, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Because you are different," it said. "Your species holds a unique potential. While the galaxy cast you out, it failed to see what you could become. You have the strength to rise above your limitations, to take your place among the stars. But you must be willing to change, to evolve. Hargrave swallowed hard. Change, evolve. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. A challenge that demanded an answer. What did that even mean? And what would they have to give in return for such power? Could they trust this ancient entity, or was it leading them down a dangerous path? The silence in the room was broken by Green, who spoke up, his voice filled with suspicion. What's the catch? He asked bluntly. Nothing comes for free, especially not something like this. What do you want in return for giving us this power? The Keeper's image seemed to pause, as if considering the question before answering. What we ask is simple, it said. You will become the guardians of the forgotten. You will take what you have learned here and return to the galaxy. But beware, the galaxy is not just a collection of worlds. It is a living, breathing entity. And there are forces far more ancient than the Council itself that will stop at nothing to keep you in your place. The words sent a shiver down Hargrave's spine. The galaxy was a living entity. He had heard rumors, ancient stories told by those who believed in myth stories about the true, darker forces that controlled the galaxy. But this was something else entirely. What kind of forces? Lieutenant Harper asked, her voice tense. The Keeper's eyes flashed with an eerie light. The ones who created the Council. The ones who have kept the galaxy under their thumb for eons. You will not only face the Council's wrath, but the wrath of those who do not want humanity to rise. They will fight you. They will do everything in their power to destroy you. A heavy silence filled the room. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each of them realizing that what they were about to embark on wasn't just a struggle for survival, it was a fight for something far greater than they had ever imagined. Hargrave's heart pounded in his chest. He looked at his crew, each one of them silently asking the same question. Do we accept? His gaze hardened. The galaxy had cast them out. They had nothing left to lose. But if they took this power, would they become the very thing that once feared them? Or would they be the ones to reshape the future of the galaxy? We accept, Hargrave said, his voice unwavering. The Keeper's image shimmered one final time, its gaze filled with what could almost be called approval. Then you shall begin your journey. The path ahead will not be easy. But you are not alone. We are watching. As the image of the Keeper faded, the crew was left in stunned silence. They had made their choice. Now, there was no turning back. The galaxy might have rejected them, but they were about to change the course of history forever. The moment the Keeper's image vanished, a deep silence swept over the crew. The hum of the station seemed to intensify, the walls vibrating with an unfamiliar energy. The atmosphere was heavy, charged with a sense of both dread and anticipation. Hargrave stood motionless, his mind reeling. The decision had been made. They had accepted the Keeper's offer. But what did that truly mean? What awaited them on the other side of this strange new power? Hargrave's thoughts were interrupted by the sudden crackle of the ship's communication system. It was Green's voice again, but this time, it sounded different, hushed, almost frantic. Captain, you need to see this. Without a word, Hargrave turned and strode quickly toward the communications panel. Green's face appeared on the screen, his eyes wide with alarm. It's happening, Green said, his voice barely more than a whisper. The ship's systems are reacting. I think the power is beginning to integrate with us. Hargrave felt his stomach drop. Integrating? The words didn't make sense. They had only just accepted the Keeper's offer. How could this power already be affecting them? But, before he could speak, the room around them began to shift. The walls seemed to pulse, like the beating of a heart, and an eerie light emanated from the very core of the station. It was as if the place itself was alive, responding to their presence. Captain, Harper shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. Look at the monitors. Hargrave turned to the nearest console, his eyes widening as he saw what had happened. The ship's systems, once mere machines, now displayed patterns and symbols that didn't belong to any known language. Energy levels fluctuated wildly, as if something was being drawn into them. But what was it? What was causing this strange reaction? We've been changed, Green said, almost in disbelief. The energy, it's inside us now. The words hung in the air like a weight. The crew stood frozen, each of them feeling the strange pull of this newfound power. Hargrave's fingers tingled as if they were being charged with an electric current, and he could feel the air around him thickening with an unknown force. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was undeniable. Something had shifted. Hargrave took a deep breath, his mind trying to wrap around the impossible. Was this what the Keeper had meant? They had accepted the offer to rise beyond humanity, but he never imagined it would happen this quickly, this completely. The power was no longer some distant possibility. It was now a part of them, embedded in their very being. They had become vessels for something far greater than they were. But was it a blessing or a curse? A sudden jolt ran through the ship. The walls shuddered, and the lights flickered. Then, all at once, the consoles blinked to life. Strange symbols swirled across the screens, and the station itself seemed to respond, as if it were communicating with them. "It's like we're connected to the station now," Green said, his voice filled with awe. "The systems, the energy, we can feel it. It's like we're part of it." Hargrave's breath caught in his throat. Connected. The power wasn't just inside them, it was part of the very fabric of the station itself. Was this what the Keeper had meant when it spoke of rising beyond humanity? They were no longer just humans, at least, not in the way they once were. They had become something new, something different. The hum of the station grew louder, more intense. And then, as if on command, a large door at the far end of the room slid open, revealing a vast chamber. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but Hargrave's instincts kicked in. Whatever this was, they had to face it. They had no choice but to move forward. "Let's go," Hargrave ordered, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his chest. The crew followed him into the chamber. As they stepped inside, the door behind them slid shut with a soft hiss. The room was bathed in an eerie glow, and in the center, a massive, glowing structure stood, an altar of sorts, but one that seemed to pulse with energy, as if it were alive. It was surrounded by more symbols, these etched into the floor, walls, and ceiling. The patterns seemed to move, shifting and changing as they looked at them. It was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic. "This is it," Harper whispered, her voice filled with awe and fear. "This is what the Keeper was leading us to." Hargrave stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The altar seemed to call to him, pulling him toward it. Without thinking, he reached out, his fingers brushing against the glowing surface. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy coursed through him, and his vision exploded into a dazzling array of lights, that it was as if time itself bent around him. He saw images, visions, memories that were not his own. Strange, alien landscapes, battles fought in the farthest corners of the galaxy. And then, a flash of light, bright, overwhelming, as if the very stars themselves were being born and dying all at once. The images filled his mind, overwhelming his senses, and for a moment, he thought he might lose himself in the flood of information. But just as quickly as it had come, it stopped. Hargrave staggered back, his heart racing, gasping for air. The crew stood frozen, their eyes wide, staring at him as if he had been changed in some fundamental way. And in a way he had. "What did you see?" Green asked, his voice shaking. Hargrave shook his head, trying to clear the fog that clouded his mind. "I don't know, but it was like, I saw everything. The galaxy, the history, all of it." In a single moment, Harper stepped forward, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. "Do you think we're ready to use this power?" Hargrave took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what had just happened to him, what had happened to all of them, but one thing was certain. They were no longer the same. The Keeper had shown them the path, and now it was up to them to walk it. "Ready or not," Hargrave said, his voice firm. "This is our future. We can't turn back now." As the crew stood in the chamber, the power of the station pulsing around them, they realized that they had crossed a threshold. The galaxy had cast them out, but now they were something else entirely, something that could change the fate of everything. They had accepted the Keeper's offer, and now they would rise. The air inside the Resolute felt different, now charged, alive with the hum of something that hadn't been there before. As the ship drifted further from the ancient station, Captain Hargrave could feel the energy within them, swirling just beneath the surface, a constant presence that was both exhilarating and unsettling. His crew had changed, though no one dared speak about it openly just yet. They all felt it, but none of them knew exactly what it meant or how far it would go. Hargrave glanced over at Lieutenant Harper, who stood near the command console, her fingers idly tapping against the edge of the screen. She didn't seem entirely like herself anymore. There was a quiet intensity in her gaze, a focus that wasn't there before, and yet, her expression seemed to match the rest of the crew, a mixture of awe and fear. They were all grappling with the same question. "What do we do now?" "The signal," Green suddenly said, his voice breaking the silence. "It's gone." Hargrave furrowed his brow, stepping toward the communication panel. The mysterious signal that had led them to the ancient station had faded once they left its orbit. The faint hum that had been a constant presence in the ship's systems now lay dormant, as if the station itself had been a kind of anchor, keeping them connected to something greater. "That's strange," Hargrave muttered. "I thought it would follow us. It's like it was never meant to be permanent." Harper added, her voice soft. "Maybe it was guiding us to a point, and now it's done." Hargrave's gaze flicked to the crew, his mind turning over their new reality. The Keeper had warned them that taking this power would change them, but he hadn't been prepared for how much. The energy inside them pulsed with a kind of quiet urgency, as if the very fabric of the ship and their bodies was beginning to synchronize with something greater, something beyond human comprehension. "This isn't just about survival anymore," Hargrave said, his voice steady, but filled with an undercurrent of something darker. "We're not just running from the galaxy now. We've been given a chance, a way to fight back." A low murmur rippled through the crew. They had heard Hargrave's words before, back in the station, but now they felt heavier. The threat of the galaxy, the Council's rejection, it had been more than a mere insult. They had been cast aside, left to fend for themselves in a universe that viewed them as little more than an inconvenience. But now they had something to fight for. Hargrave turned to the navigation console. A faint glimmer of a plan began to form in his mind. It was bold, dangerous, but it was the only plan they had. He couldn't ignore the way the power inside him, inside all of them, seemed to call out, urging them forward. "Set a course for the nearest Council-controlled sector," he ordered, his voice resolute. "We need to show them what humanity is capable of." A collective breath seemed to be held as the crew moved into action. The Resolute adjusted its course, slowly turning toward the center of galactic power. It felt like a gambler, desperate, reckless gamble, but Hargrave couldn't deny the truth that lay behind his decision. They had the power now. The galaxy's rejection had only made them stronger, more determined, and they would make the Council regret its mistake. As the ship soared through the stars, the crew's newfound abilities began to manifest in subtle ways. Harper was the first to notice it in herself. She could feel it in her hands, in her fingertips, a faint surge of energy that pulsed with every movement. She was no longer just a soldier. She was something more. It was like her senses had been sharpened, her reactions quicker, her mind clearer. She could feel the ship's systems, not just as a technician, but as though she were a part of them. The walls, the engines, the power surging through the corridors, all of it hummed with a frequency she could now understand. "I think I'm sinking with the ship," she said, her voice a little stunned, but filled with awe. "It's like the ship's energy is inside me, too. It's as if we're one." Green turned toward her, his eyes widening. "You can feel it too?" he asked. Hargrave, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "All of us are changing. This isn't just power, it's a new way of being. We have to learn to control it, or it will control us." The crew nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. It wasn't just about gaining abilities. It was about keeping control over them. They were teetering on the edge of something extraordinary and dangerous. That as the Resolute neared the Council's space, Hargrave couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He could sense it now, the hum of the galaxy around them, the silent pressure of its countless inhabitants. The thought sent a chill down his spine. There were powers out there far beyond their understanding. And yet, they were no longer powerless. Suddenly, the comms lit up, and a message crackled through the speakers. It was a transmission from a Council fleet. Hargrave's pulse quickened as he listened to the voice that came through, cold and detached. "This is Captain Varen of the Galactic Council Fleet. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourselves immediately." Hargrave felt a surge of confidence flow through him. This was it. This was the moment they had been preparing for. "This is Captain Hargrave of the human ship Resolute," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "And we've come to make sure you never forget the mistake you made by casting humanity aside." There was a long silence on the other end of the transmission, a tension that filled the air like static. Hargrave could feel his crew holding their breath, waiting for the Council to respond. "We will not tolerate threats from a species that was deemed unworthy," the voice finally replied. The tone cold and dismissive. Hargrave smiled, a grim, determined smile. "You will, because you've underestimated us, and we won't be forgotten anymore." With a single command, he cut the communication and turned to face his crew. "Prepare yourselves. This is just the beginning." The Resolute surged forward, its course set for the heart of the Council's power. The crew was ready. They had accepted their new power, and now they would wield it. They had been cast out, forgotten, but no longer. The galaxy had made its mistake, and humanity was about to show them what it truly meant to be underestimated. The Resolute shot through space with a newfound intensity, its sleek hull slicing through the blackness as the crew braced themselves for the inevitable. The message they had sent to the Council was clear. Humanity would not be silenced. They would not be forgotten. Now, it was time to back those words up with action. Captain Hargrave stood in front of the viewports, his fingers drumming rhythmically against the edge of the console. The galaxy stretched out before him, a cold, indifferent expanse of stars. But in that moment, It felt like something more. It felt like a battlefield. The Council had built its empire on the backs of the forgotten, the weak, the ones it had cast aside, and now humanity was ready to claim its place. Captain Lieutenant Harper's voice broke the silence, and he turned to find her standing at his side, her face a mask of determination. "We're entering their space. The fleet's just ahead." Hargrave nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. His crew had changed, and so had he. The energy that coursed through their veins now was undeniable. It was no longer a distant possibility, it was part of them. It had reshaped the way they thought, moved, and acted. The power from the Keeper's station pulsed beneath their skin, urging them forward, making them feel invincible. But even with all that power, Hargrave knew they had to be careful. They couldn't afford to underestimate the Council, not even in their new form. "Prepare for contact," Hargrave said, his voice steady but laced with an unshakable resolve. "We don't know what they'll throw at us, but we're ready for anything." As the ship neared the Council fleet, a cold, oppressive atmosphere settled over the bridge. The massive ships of the Council were like looming shadows, their sleek, intimidating forms dwarfing the Resolute in comparison. The moment they entered communication range, Hargrave's screen flickered, and a voice echoed through the comm system. "This is Admiral Cale of the Galactic Council. You are entering prohibited space. Leave immediately or face the consequences." Hargrave felt a surge of power ripple through him, the energy within him answering the challenge before he even spoke. His crew, too, seemed to pulse with a quiet fury, their bodies moving with precision as they prepared for what was coming. "Admiral Cale," Hargrave said calmly, though his voice carried the weight of the new power inside him, "we are humanity, and we've come to remind you that your decisions have consequences. We've been forgotten, cast aside, but we're done running. We won't back down." There was a long silence from the other side, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Then, Cale's voice crackled back, cold and threatening. "You do not understand the forces you are challenging. The Council will crush you, just as we have done to every species that dared to defy us." Hargrave's lips curled into a grim smile. "We'll see about that." With a flick of his hand, he gave the order, and the Resolute surged forward. The ship's newly awakened power seemed to resonate with the energy in the space around them. The crew, more attuned to their surroundings than ever before, felt it as well, their bond with the ship, with each other, and with the very forces of space itself, growing stronger by the second. The Council ships, massive and imposing, began to move in response, their guns locked onto the Resolute's path, their weapon systems ready to fire at any moment. The tension was unbearable, the anticipation crackling in the air like static before a storm. And then, it happened. A wave of force, raw, unfiltered, and terrifying, rippled through the space between them. Hargrave felt it first, a surge that went straight to his core, like the pulse of a living, breathing entity. He didn't know how, but the energy within him answered, amplifying the wave into something more, something controlled. The Resolute shuddered as Hargrave focused, pulling the raw power of the station into his own hands, guiding it, shaping it, and turning it into a weapon. The massive Council ships began to tremble as the wave collided with them. Hargrave had no idea what kind of force they were up against, but in that moment, he didn't care. He could feel the power of 1,000 stars within him, the potential of untold forces at his fingertips. The Resolute's energy cannons fired with deadly precision, and the wave of destructive power from the ship's core ripped through the front lines of the Council fleet. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. They were no longer the forgotten, they were humanity. And humanity was capable of far more than anyone had imagined. The Council fleet faltered. For the first time in centuries, they were met with resistance, a force they hadn't anticipated. The ships, though powerful, began to buckle beneath the assault. Some attempted to retaliate, firing their own weapons, but the energy within the Resolute and within the crew was too much. They felt every shot, every movement, as if the ship itself was a part of them, guiding them. "Captain, they're retreating," Green said, his voice filled with disbelief as the Council ships began to scatter, some breaking off from the formation entirely, their tactical formations collapsing under the unexpected attack. Hargrave couldn't believe it. The Resolute was small compared to the Council's warships, but it was far from weak. The new power they had embraced, whatever it was, had made them into something more than human. The fleet, once a symbol of the Council's dominance, was now scattering like frightened animals, fleeing from a threat they didn't understand. But Hargrave knew this wasn't the end. The Council might have been retreating for now, but this was just the first skirmish in a much larger war, and the galaxy had no idea what was coming. "Stay on course," Hargrave said, his voice cold and determined. We've made our point. Now we show them what humanity is capable of. As the Resolute pressed forward into the heart of the Council's space, the crew could feel the weight of what they had done. They weren't just survivors anymore. They were a force that the galaxy would have to reckon with. They had struck the first blow, but it wouldn't be the last. The Resolute continued its journey through the galaxy, leaving behind a trail of wreckage and chaos, a testament to humanity's new place in the stars. The galaxy had rejected them, but now they had risen, and the Council would never forget the mistake they had made. The Resolute sailed through the heart of the galaxy like a comet streaking across the night sky, its crew now more united than ever before. The attack on the Council fleet had sent shockwaves through the galaxy, but this was only the beginning. Captain Hargrave felt the weight of his decision pressing against him, the consequences of challenging the greatest power in the galaxy now unfolding before him. But in his heart, he knew there was no turning back. There was no undoing what they had done. Humanity was no longer just a forgotten relic of the past. They had become a force, and the galaxy would soon know their name. "We've caused a stir, Captain," Lieutenant Harper said quietly as she stood beside him, staring at the navigation console. Her expression was a mix of awe and anxiety. The recent skirmish had shaken them all. They were no longer the hunted, they were the hunters now. Hargrave nodded, his gaze fixed on the stars ahead. "The Council will respond, but we've proven something. They underestimated us, and we've only just begun." The Resolute was now heading toward the most dangerous part of their journey. The Council, though fractured and temporarily retreating, would regroup. They would bring more firepower, more ships, and they would come after humanity with everything they had. But Hargrave couldn't afford to think about that, not now, not when they were so close to achieving something greater. He had to keep his focus on the larger plan. The galaxy had its eyes on them now. It was time to take that attention and turn it into power. As the ship glided toward the Council's central core systems, Hargrave called a meeting in the command room. The atmosphere was tense, the crew on edge but more determined than ever before. They had unlocked something in themselves, a power that had always been latent in their species, hidden beneath the surface. The energy they had drawn from the Keeper station still pulsed within them, a constant hum that never seemed to fade. But how much of this newfound strength was humanity's true potential? How much had they yet to discover? "Everyone, listen up." Hargrave's voice was calm but commanding as the crew gathered around the table. "What we did at the Council fleet, it's just the beginning. They're going to retaliate. They will come for us with everything they have. But we don't stop, not now. We've seen what we can do. And now, we need to show them that humanity will no longer live in fear of anyone. We will take what is ours." The crew nodded, their faces steely with resolve. They had all felt its power, the connection to something much larger than themselves. But they also knew they couldn't do this alone. They needed to rally the other scattered human survivors across the galaxy. The Resolute was no longer just a ship. It was the symbol of humanity's resurgence, a rallying point for those who had been cast out, those who had been broken by the Council. "We've been scattered and beaten for too long," Hargrave continued, his voice hardening. "It's time to unite. We'll need every ship, every survivor, every force we can gather. We are no longer isolated. We are a force that the galaxy can't ignore." Hargrave could see the crew's determination in their eyes. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming humanity's place in the stars. But even with all the power they had unlocked, the road ahead was uncertain. There were forces beyond even the Keeper's reach, ancient powers, entities that had shaped the galaxy long before the Council's rise to dominance. Hargrave turned to the navigation console, his fingers tracing the outline of the course ahead. "First, we find the human outposts, the survivors scattered across the galaxy. Then we move on the Council's core systems. We need to hit them where it hurts, destroy their command centers, disable their supply lines, and take back what they've stolen from us." The crew exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of excitement and fear. The magnitude of their mission was beginning to sink in. They were about to take on the might of the Galactic Council, but the energy within them, this power they had embraced, seemed to fortify their resolve. They had fought against the galaxy's indifference and had come out victorious, but this next phase of the mission would be even more dangerous. They needed to be ready for whatever the Council would throw at them. "Captain," Green spoke up, his voice filled with a confidence that had begun to emerge within him since their transformation. "I've been running simulations on the Resolute systems. We can modify our weapons to channel more of the energy we've absorbed. It'll give us an edge against their fleets." Hargrave gave a sharp nod. "Good, we'll need all the advantages we can get. If we can hit the Council's fleet with a full-force strike, it'll send a message that we're not just a nuisance. We're a force they can't control." The crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the battle ahead. The Resolute's systems were being fine-tuned, its weaponry upgraded to unleash the raw energy they now commanded. There was no hesitation now. Each crew member felt the same pull within them, the urgency to fight, to rise, to prove that humanity had the strength to change the galaxy's fate. And then, the moment arrived. The first wave of the Council's reinforcements appeared on the horizon, their fleet massive, their presence overwhelming. The Resolute stood alone, surrounded by the growing darkness of space. But inside, Hargrave knew one thing. This wasn't about size. It wasn't about numbers. It was about power. And they had power now. Steady, Hargrave commanded, his voice like steel. We'll strike first. Don't wait for them to make the first move. The Resolute moved into position, and the crew braced themselves. Their new abilities, their heightened senses, told them everything they needed to know. They could feel the Council ships approaching, their weapons powering up, but it was too late. With a force that shook the very core of the ship, the Resolute fired its upgraded energy blasts. The weaponry, now a reflection of the power they had unlocked, tore through the Council fleet like a thunderstorm. Ships exploded, their shields buckling under the intensity of the blast. Hargrave felt a surge of exhilaration as the energy flowed through him, as though the Resolute itself was a part of his very being, amplifying his every command. Keep pushing forward, Hargrave shouted. We've got this. We're taking back the stars. The Resolute tore through the Council's defenses, its energy weapons cutting through their ships like a knife through butter. For the first time, Hargrave felt the full weight of their power, the power of humanity's will, the strength to fight, to never be forgotten again. The tide was turning, and the galaxy would soon know that humanity had risen.